Someone is crazy in love with you, and it's because you did this. Watch before it's too late. This message didn't find you by accident. And no, that's not just a dramatic opening line. There is a reason you felt drawn to these words. A reason your attention slowed down just enough to stay. A reason something inside you whispered, "Read this." Because someone very real, someone you know or once knew, is struggling right now. They are struggling because of you. Not because you chased them, not because you begged, not because you demanded clarity, closure, or commitment, but because you stopped doing something they expected you would always do. And that changed everything. Hey everyone, welcome to Psych Lens. Don't forget to subscribe, hit the bell icon, and select all, because every video can change your mindset. Let's start here quietly. There was a moment in your life when you decided to choose yourself. It may not have been loud. It may not have been dramatic. There was no announcement, no final speech, no long explanation. Just a shift. Where once there was striving, now there is stillness. Where once there was panic, now there is peace. Where once there was a flood of justifications, now there is only a pause. Your departure wasn't fueled by rage. You didn't vanish to teach them a lesson. You merely ceased to betray your own needs. And the instant you made that shift, something within them fractured. This is the twist they never anticipated. They assumed your proximity was infinite. Always empathetic, always granting second chances, always lingering, always praying they would finally pick you. They viewed your affection as a certainty. And when a person becomes convinced that your devotion is a fixed asset, they stop guarding it. They fail to rank it first. They fail to feed it. They procrastinate on it. They shelve it. They handle it like a convenience they can circle back to at their leisure. But then, the dynamic shifted. You ceased the campaign to prove your value. You quit articulating your hurt. You retired the need to demonstrate your fidelity. You stopped contorting yourself simply to sustain the bond. And that quiet grew thunderous. This is the precise breeding ground for obsession. Profound love rarely blooms when one feels entirely in command. They fall deeply in love when they realize they may have already lost you. When the familiar emotional access disappears. When the comfort they took for granted is suddenly unavailable. When the safety net they assumed would always be there is gone. Right now, whether they admit it or not, this person is replaying moments in their mind. Your laugh, your patience, the way you cared without keeping score, the way you stayed when it would have been easier to leave, the way you listened, the way you saw them, even in the parts they tried to hide. And the worst part for them is this: they didn't notice your value while they still had access to your energy. They noticed it when your energy stopped reaching for them. They feel it even if they don't say it, even if they haven't messaged you. Even if they act fine on the surface, even if they pretend they're busy or unbothered, even if they post smiles and distractions, they feel the absence. Because you weren't just someone who liked them, you were someone who saw them. And when someone loses the person who truly sees them, they don't just miss the relationship, they miss who they were when they were loved by you. This is something Carl Jung understood deeply. He once said, "The greatest burden a child must bear is the unlived life of its parents." And in adult relationships, something similar happens. People carry the unlived parts of themselves into love. When you saw them fully, you touched those unlived parts. And when you stepped back, those parts had nowhere to hide anymore. You did something rare. You didn't harden your heart. You didn't become cold or cruel. You didn't seek revenge. You didn't try to make them jealous. You didn't turn your pain into performance. You simply stepped back with dignity. That kind of self-respect is magnetic because it sends a message without saying a word. It tells the universe and everyone in it, I know who I am, even if you don't. And when someone realizes they underestimated someone who knows their own worth, it shakes them. Now let's talk about what's happening in their mind. They are questioning themselves, quietly, repeatedly. Sometimes late at night, sometimes in moments of stillness they try to avoid. Why didn't I choose them when I had the chance? Why did I think they'd always wait? Why does everything feel emptier now? They scroll. They hesitate. They replay conversations. They wonder if you've moved on. They wonder if it's too late. They type your name and erase it. Because reaching out now means facing a truth they avoided for too long. You were real, and they weren't ready. Carl Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." Your absence has forced their unconscious to the surface. Feelings they buried, regrets they postponed, realizations they avoided. All of it is rising now because the distraction of your constant presence is gone. And here's the part most people misunderstand. Someone being crazy in love with you does not mean they suddenly know how to love you correctly. Love without maturity still hesitates. Love without healing still fears commitment. Love without growth still delays action. Feelings alone are not transformation. That's why this moment is not about you running back. It's about understanding what you activated. You showed them what love looks like without forcing it. You showed them what consistency feels like without control. You showed them what emotional safety is without manipulation. And now, without you doing anything at all, they are forced to feel the full weight of your absence. That weight is heavy, heavier than any argument, heavier than any goodbye, heavier than any explanation you could have given, because silence invites reflection. Distance creates clarity. And space does work that words never can. Carl Jung once said, "Loneliness does not come from having no people around, but from being unable to communicate the things that seem important to oneself." You communicated what mattered through your presence, and now through your absence, they finally understand what they lost. But here's the warning, and it matters. If you rush back now, if you break your silence too soon, if you rescue them from this discomfort, they will not grow. This space is doing work you never could. This distance is teaching lessons your love already tried to teach. And deep down, you know this isn't about punishment. It's about alignment, because the right person doesn't wake up only after you leave. The right person chooses you while you're still standing there. They don't need the threat of loss to value you. They value you because they see you. So why did this message come to you now? Because your heart is soft. And soft hearts sometimes confuse love with responsibility. You feel their energy. You sense their regret. You may even dream about them. That doesn't mean you're meant to go back. It means the bond was real. But not every real bond is meant to be continued. Some are meant to be completed. Carl Jung said, "What you resist not only persists, but will grow in size." They resisted growth while you were there. Now, without you cushioning the discomfort, growth is unavoidable. If they come back, let them come back changed. Not just missing you, not just lonely, not just afraid of losing you, but ready. Ready to choose, ready to show up, ready to love without hesitation. Anything less is the same cycle wearing a new mask. And if they don't come back, Know this: you were never hard to love. They were just unprepared. And someone else, someone aligned with your growth, your depth, your timing, will recognize you immediately. No confusion, no waiting, no almost. Final thought for now. The reason someone is crazy in love with you is not because you chased them. It's because you stopped chasing and remembered who you are. And that is power. Quiet power. Unshakable power. Don't give it away. If this message spoke to you, stay with me. There's more you need to hear. And here's where it goes deeper, in a way most people never talk about. When you stepped back, it didn't just remove your presence from their life. It removed the mirror you were holding up for them. You were reflecting parts of themselves they didn't even realize mattered. Your attention made them feel significant. Your patience made them feel safe. Your consistency made them feel grounded. And when all of that quietly disappeared, it didn't just feel like losing you. It felt like losing stability. This is why their reaction isn't logical. It's emotional, internal, subconscious. At first, they told themselves stories. They said you were just busy, that you needed space, that you'd be back. They distracted themselves. Work, friends, entertainment, validation elsewhere. But distraction only works when something is shallow. What you created wasn't shallow. It was rooted. And roots don't disappear just because someone looks away. So the second phase began. Confusion. They started noticing the silence in moments they didn't expect. In the middle of a good day. In the quiet before sleep. In the pause between notifications. Your absence began to echo. Not loudly, subtly. The most dangerous kind. Because subtle discomfort is harder to escape than obvious pain. They wondered why no one else felt the same. Why conversations felt thinner. Why laughter felt shorter. Why attention from others didn't land the way yours did. That's when comparison crept in. Not conscious comparison. Emotional comparison. The kind that happens automatically when the nervous system recognizes safety that's no longer there. And this is important. They are not missing you the way people miss entertainment or convenience. They are missing regulation. You helped regulate their emotions without trying to. Your presence lowered their internal noise. Your consistency calmed their uncertainty. You were a grounding force. When you left, even quietly, the system destabilized. That destabilization is what feels like obsession. They replay interactions not because they're romantic, but because their mind is searching for orientation. They go over what they said, what they didn't say, where things shifted, when you stopped explaining, when your tone changed, when your effort softened. They're trying to locate the moment control slipped away. And here's the part that stings them the most. They realize you didn't leave because you stopped caring. You left because you started caring about yourself. That realization hits the ego hard. Because if you had left in anger, they could blame emotion. If you had left dramatically, they could blame conflict. If you had left loudly, they could tell themselves you were unstable. But you didn't give them that escape. You left calmly, cleanly, with self-respect. That forces one uncomfortable conclusion. You didn't need them to survive. And nothing unsettles someone more than realizing the person they undervalued is perfectly capable of moving forward without them. This is where the internal bargaining starts. They think about reaching out, not with clarity, but with curiosity. Not with commitment, but with testing. A casual message, a check-in, something light, something that doesn't require accountability. Because part of them wants reassurance without responsibility. And this is where your restraint matters. Because if you respond too quickly, too warmly, too familiarly, you restore the old dynamic. You signal that access is still available without change, and the lesson stops. But when you don't rush, when you remain grounded, when you don't chase clarity from someone who once avoided giving it, something powerful happens. They sit with themselves, and most people are not comfortable there. They start noticing patterns. How they delay decisions, how they assume people will wait, how they avoid choosing until the pressure forces them, how they mistake emotional availability for permanence. These are not thoughts they enjoy having. These are confrontations. And confrontation with self is the birthplace of either growth or regret. This is why the energy feels intense right now. You might feel it as sudden thoughts of them, random memories, emotional waves that seem to come out of nowhere. That's not coincidence. When a bond was real, disconnection creates reverberation. Not because you're meant to return, but because something unresolved is being processed on both sides. But listen carefully. Processing does not mean reconnection. It means integration. You are integrating the version of yourself that finally chose dignity over overextension. They are integrating the realization that love isn't something you pause and return to later, unchanged. And this is where many people sabotage themselves. They confuse empathy with obligation. They think, I understand them now, so maybe I should help. But you already helped. You helped by loving honestly. You helped by being consistent. You helped by showing up. The next phase of their growth cannot be carried by you. It has to be chosen by them. That's why this space is sacred. It's uncomfortable. It's quiet. It's uncertain. But it's honest. And honesty is the only place real transformation happens. You didn't create obsession by manipulation. You didn't withdraw to gain control. You didn't play games. You simply stopped pouring energy into a container that wasn't holding it properly. And now they feel the leak. They feel what happens when emotional supply is no longer unlimited. When access is no longer assumed. When love is no longer guaranteed. This is also why you may feel stronger and softer at the same time. Stronger because you're no longer chasing alignment. Softer because you're no longer armoring yourself to be chosen. You're allowing yourself to exist without negotiation. That's not weakness. That's integration. And here's something no one tells you. Even if they never come back, this shift changed you permanently. You will never again over-explain to be understood. You will never again abandon your needs to maintain connection. You will never again confuse consistency with self-sacrifice. That's the real win. Because from this point forward, you don't attract people who need to be convinced of your value. You attract people who recognize it instinctively. And those people don't hesitate. They don't wait until silence forces awareness. They don't realize your worth only after distance teaches them. They choose while they have you. So stay here, stay grounded, stay present, stay unattached to outcomes. There's more unfolding than you can see right now. And now something subtle but important begins to happen inside you as well. Even if you don't fully recognize it yet. When you stopped reaching, you didn't just create space in the connection. You created space inside yourself. Space where anxiety used to live. Space where anticipation used to pull at your chest. Space where you once waited for replies, signals, reassurance. That space feels unfamiliar at first. Quiet can feel unsettling when you're used to emotional noise. But that quiet is not emptiness. It's alignment beginning to take shape. At first, your mind still reaches out of habit. You think of them in moments you used to share. You imagine what they're feeling. You sense the pull, not because you're weak, but because bonds don't dissolve instantly. They unwind slowly, layer by layer. What's different now is that you're no longer betraying yourself to soothe that pull. And that's what changes everything. Because for the first time, the connection is no longer being sustained by your effort alone. It's being held up by truth. And truth is heavier than effort. This is where people often misunderstand what's happening. They think silence is passive. They think distance is doing nothing. But silence is active when it's chosen consciously. Distance is powerful when it's rooted in self-respect, not avoidance. You are no longer chasing clarity from someone who avoided giving it. You are no longer explaining your needs to someone who benefited from not meeting them. You are no longer performing emotional labor just to keep a bond breathing. And that absence of self-betrayal has a frequency. They feel it. They feel it because suddenly, the dynamic they relied on is gone. The emotional elasticity they stretched without consequence has snapped back into form, and now they're forced to meet themselves without your buffering presence. That's uncomfortable. Because when someone no longer has access to your softness on demand, they have to confront what they were taking from it. Validation, stability, emotional grounding, assurance. You were a place they rested without realizing it. And now the rest is gone. This is when the fantasies begin. Not romantic fantasies, regret fantasies, alternate timelines. If only I had. What if I had chosen differently? Why didn't I take them seriously? These thoughts don't come from sudden enlightenment. They come from loss of access. And loss of access is one of the fastest ways the mind learns value. But here's what's happening underneath that you need to understand. They are not just missing you. They are missing the version of themselves they were allowed to be with you. The calmer version, the more open version. The version that felt seen without having to perform. The version that didn't feel alone even in silence. That's why the longing feels so intense. It's not about possession. It's about identity disruption. You were woven into their emotional ecosystem. Not loudly, not forcefully, naturally. And when you removed yourself, the system didn't collapse immediately. It destabilized slowly, quietly, in ways they couldn't ignore forever. This is why time feels strange right now. Days may feel heavier for them. Moments stretch. Nights linger. Meanwhile, for you, time may feel clearer, but tender. You're not spiraling, but you're not numb either. You're present. And presence can feel raw when you're not escaping into effort. This is the phase where many people second-guess themselves. They think, maybe I was too harsh. Maybe I should check in. Maybe I misunderstood. This is where compassion tries to pull you back into responsibility for someone else's emotional development. But pause here. Ask yourself one honest question. Did you leave to hurt them? Or did you leave to stop hurting yourself? Because those are not the same thing. You didn't withdraw to control the outcome. You withdrew because staying required you to keep shrinking. And love that requires shrinking is not love. It's endurance. Carl Jung said, "Where love rules, there is no will to power. And where power predominates, love is lacking." You stepped out of a dynamic where your love was being unconsciously used as power over your patience, your hope, your willingness to wait. That's not failure. That's discernment. And here's something you may not realize yet. By stepping back, you didn't close the door. You removed the illusion that the door would always stay open, no matter how you were treated. That distinction matters. If they are capable of growth, this moment will activate it. Not immediately. Growth is slow, uncomfortable, often invisible at first. But real growth doesn't start with grand gestures. It starts with self-confrontation. And if they are not capable of growth, this moment will still protect you, because it prevents you from returning to a dynamic where your love did all the work. Either way, you win. But winning doesn't always feel triumphant. Sometimes it feels lonely. Sometimes it feels quiet. Sometimes it feels like standing in an empty room after a long conversation ends. That doesn't mean you made the wrong choice. It means you finally chose yourself without applause. And there's a grief in that. Grief for what could have been. Grief for the future you imagined. Grief for the version of them you believed might show up one day. That grief is real. Don't dismiss it. But don't let it rewrite history either. Because clarity without nostalgia tells a consistent story. You gave honesty. You gave patience. You gave presence. And you stopped when continuing required you to abandon yourself. That is not abandonment. That is boundaries forming. And boundaries don't punish. They reveal. They reveal who respects them, who grows to meet them, and who disappears when access is no longer effortless. That revelation is happening now, and it's not your job to manage it. You may feel moments of doubt because you are empathetic. You may feel moments of longing because the bond mattered. You may feel moments of curiosity because you sense the shift in energy. But don't confuse awareness with responsibility. You are not responsible for how someone handles the consequences of their own delay. This is the phase where your nervous system recalibrates, where you learn that love does not have to be anxious. That connection does not require self-erasure. That waiting is not proof of devotion. And once your body learns that, it doesn't forget. Which means even if this person returns unchanged, something in you won't allow the old dynamic to resume. You won't be able to pretend not to see what you see now. That's growth. And growth is irreversible. So if things feel suspended right now, that's because they are not stuck. Suspended between who you were and who you're becoming. And now we arrive at the place where everything settles. Not with fireworks, not with certainty handed to you all at once, but with a deep, grounded knowing that doesn't need constant reassurance to exist. This is the stage where urgency dissolves. You're no longer asking, what are they feeling right now? You're no longer scanning signs, energy shifts, or timing windows. You're no longer waiting for a moment to respond or a signal to act, because something more stable has taken root inside you. You accept that it changed you, and you also accept that it reached a limit. Not because you weren't enough, but because mutual readiness wasn't there. That acceptance frees you. And freedom doesn't shout, it exhales. For them, this is often the hardest point, because this is when they sense, not intellectually but emotionally, that you are no longer suspended in waiting, that your life is no longer paused in possibility, that you're not holding the door open out of hope or habit. They feel the shift from distance to detachment, not cold detachment, clear detachment, the kind that says, I'm open to what's aligned, not attached to what's familiar. That's when they understand something painful but necessary. You didn't leave to teach them a lesson, but a lesson arrived anyway. And now the responsibility is entirely theirs. Carl Jung said, I am not what happened to me. I am what I choose to become. This is the crossroads for both of you. They may choose to remain who they were, someone who realizes too late. Or they may choose growth, real growth, the kind that doesn't chase, but changes. But here's the key truth. Their choice no longer determines your direction. You are no longer shaped by whether someone sees you clearly or not. You are shaped by how clearly you see yourself. That's the integration. You're no longer operating from longing. You're operating from alignment. You're no longer interpreting silence as meaning. You're listening to your own peace. You're no longer asking whether love will arrive. You're asking whether it meets your standard when it does. And that standard isn't rigid. It's not demanding. It's not built from fear. It's built from self-trust. Self-trust that says, I don't need to be chosen late. I don't need to be realized after loss. I don't need to prove my worth through patience. I need reciprocity, presence, consistency. Anything else is nostalgia disguised as hope. This is where many people feel a strange mix of grief and relief. Grief for what might have been. Relief that they no longer have to carry the uncertainty. That duality is normal. It means you cared, and you grew. And here's something important. If they do come back changed, truly changed, you will feel it immediately. Not because of words, not because of apologies, but because the dynamic will be different. There will be no hesitation, no ambiguity, no power imbalance, no emotional guessing games.
And if that doesn't happen, you won't feel tempted to negotiate your boundaries to keep them, because the old hunger is gone.
That's how you know you've healed something fundamental. You've stopped romanticizing effort without return. You've stopped confusing depth with difficulty. You've stopped mistaking waiting for devotion. You didn't lose someone. You outgrew a version of love that required you to stay smaller than you are. And that doesn't mean the connection was a mistake. It means it was a passage. Some connections come to awaken you. Some come to challenge you. Some come to show you who you are when you stop abandoning yourself. This one did exactly that. So, if you're wondering why this message still resonates, why it feels like it's speaking directly to you, it's because you're standing at the edge of a new relational identity. One where you don't chase. A reality where waiting is obsolete. A reality where you don't dissolve into the abstract concept of potential. You arrive as your complete self, and you invite the right people to meet you in that space. And the ones meant for you always will. They do not waver. They do not stall. They don't require your absence to finally comprehend your worth. They see you instantly. This is the ultimate truth. Read this slowly. It is entirely possible that someone is deeply in love with you at this very moment, precisely because you ceased the pursuit and selected yourself. That epiphany might haunt them, educate them, or transform them. Yet the true triumph lies here. You have stopped operating from a hunger to be picked. You are living from the absolute conviction of who you are. That is the definition of power. Silent, rooted, immovable force. Do not surrender it. If this message resonated with your spirit, comment the word alignment so I know it landed. Do not hoard this insight. Forward this video to someone who is seeking clarity today. And if you are prepared to explore the depths of love, attraction, and psychology, make sure to subscribe to PsychLens and enable notifications. Every single upload is crafted to fundamentally alter the way you think, love, and decide.